All right, good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it is for you. I'm Brent, an author, amateur world builder, writing educator. You can find me as werewolf-dr. on Threads, Instagram, Patreon, Ko-Fi, YouTube, or werewolf-dr, on Bluesky. And I also have all links in the chat, and I will also put those in the description when this gets to YouTube, if this gets to YouTube. We'll see how that goes. So today, what am I looking at today? I am debating, just adjust that a little bit. There we go. Debating what to do today. I was thinking about doing some random stuff or some random creation stuff. And I'm debating between either building a completely random library or school, or building a that's that. All right. Or building a kind of semi-random magic system, just for the heck of it. Whatever I do today, whichever one I do today, we'll probably do the other one tomorrow in a bonus stream. Or I may work on some other idea I've had floating around that I'm kind of tossing up in there. I think today. Hi there. That's a first time chat. Nice. How's it going? Doing any better? I think I'm going to go ahead and Nice. Excellent. Good to hear. I am debating those two. Whether to go with a magic system or play with something else random. You know what? Magic system was kind of fun, so let's go ahead and do something with that just for the heck of it. Why not? Did that before, it was kind of fun, so we're going to go with a stream, set up a new document here. I do not have any of this set up for anything. Always fun. It's that kind of where I got started with a lot, where I started having a lot of fun with things. In this case, one of the things I did just to try it out, and I wasn't particularly happy with it, was I did create, when I was kind of in this mood of putting together different randomizers for just putting together random, or tables to put together random schools, libraries, other places, groups, that sort of thing. I tried, and I think failed, to put together one for magic systems, but it still has some fun elements to it and some fun things to play around with it that just kind of get the kind of creative juices going, as it were, which is kind of nice. Did something with it a while back, maybe a month or two back, that turned out to be reasonably interesting, I think. But that should be, let me double check that. I think I've got those. I think I put those on the site, but let me double check that just to see. I do have those on there. I do have the school organization, place, and library ones on the site. Yeah, they're just kind of fun things for me to play around with in terms of making up as a way to kind of randomize things for me, get the kind of creative juices flowing, do something different. Yeah, there's actually, if I turn here, there's an alcove there that's got the all the short blades on the inside of the alcove on one wall, shelves on the other side, and then the long blades are over there, and the dice wall next to it, or across the way. That was kind of fun to do. That was the alcove was sort of a COVID project, where that used to be a closet that had really, really like country Americana wallpaper that was from the previous owners. And COVID project was tearing off all the wallpaper, repainting it, taking the door down, and taking down the door and tracks, and installing some shelves to make it into something that was actually usable, or better usable, more usable, which was kind of fun. Threw a little up in that area, a couple little stick-on wall LED lights to see things in there. So, yeah, just kind of side projects. Let's see, what am I going to play with here? I think... So one of the things I broke things down to were source. What else did I do with that one? Casting methods. Who can use... And some of this I kind of built together from... that second book, the oh yeah, rules and limits. Yes, I forgot about that. That should go in there. In this case, I just kind of put this one together, and I'm not really entirely happy with it, but it's a kind of fun starting point. I limited just to the magic itself, not society and such. That's a little bit different. That's obviously got different things going into it. Although related, I think I put, where was that? I did kind of a half-arsed one for societies and their reactions, responses as well. Things like how open are they in society, what are the kind of social views and standings, legal standing, all of that sort of stuff, relationship with religion, magic organizations, how people learn it, who learns it, all that fun stuff. Just kind of more of a way to yeah, go ahead and close that. More of a way to kind of organize some of my thoughts and things beyond in a very short, quick form, because it's nice to have that. At least I think it's nice to have that on hand. It kind of helps me as a sort of checklist to look at, rather than as sort of, or as a an outline to remind myself of what I want to think about and that sort of thing. So with the basic level of magic systems, I tend to break it down into kind of 4 or 5 major categories or major elements, I guess. And hello to Nevermore D21. Okay. Hi there. Yeah, those have been kind of gathered over many years. There's more kind of in that little by the Beatles poster back there. Shorter ones back there. My preference is shorter, and there's also some more over that way too. Yeah, the office is basically my space to decorate, and so everything that I have kind of goes into everything that I have for decorating kind of goes into this room. And it kind of ran out of space, so there's nowhere to really necessarily put the Beatles poster but back there. I've also got like a Blues Brothers one behind the door, and I think I got something hanging. No, I don't have anything hanging on the door anymore. Okay, right. Yes, I'm definitely more of a shorter blades person. I like speed over. My background originally was from the little sword shield back when I was in scouting and such, because we had troop leaders who were SCA members, and we had a every other year typically medieval camp out. But then I got some fencing in college and started running. And then the last 16 years have been Aikido, which is sword, which has some sword work in it. For writing, most of what I've done lately has been in the, I'll put it down as sort of creative nonfiction. Did a book years ago on werewolves in particularly medieval and fantasy literature out of my dissertation. Most recently, a pair of world building books. Nice. Yeah, those are a lot of fun. And then lately it's been mostly world building more than anything else. But play around with a bunch of different things. Mostly I find nonfiction is my kind of creative nonfiction is my kind of space to be in some regards, or world building is my route of fiction in many respects. Not been as big or not been as good with like short stories and that sort of thing. Although I did publish one many years ago in a magazine that no longer exists. That only existed for a year or so. But yeah. The werewolf stuff was literary criticism mixed with history. Because I did a English and history degrees, so that came out of my dissertation. I would tend to call things like, let me see. It's bandied around a lot in like the MFA programs and these sort of things. It's essentially I'm going to actually look up what terminology people use for it, because that is definitely a big question that people ask. So generally, academically at least, it's used for things like memoirs or personal essays, narrative history, long-form narrative reports. What do they got this? Speculative nonfiction, autobiographical fiction, this sort of stuff. I would probably, I don't know, world building for the sake of world building seems to be kind of somewhere in between. In some regards, it's not really storytelling as such, although it certainly involve it, but not the way people tend to think of fiction. Maybe, I don't know. Almost every semester, I start off my students with a question, asking them what is literature, and then I get them getting very, very stuck and tossing around various things until I finally just say, look, I've been working with this for 97, so that'd be 27 years, and I still don't know what literature is, or how to define it. So I didn't give that to them as sort of the trick question to figure out what's going on, or see to get to the idea that there are some questions that are or some things that are difficult to define in these ways. But generally creative nonfiction tends to be, I think, more in like the narrative nonfiction that comes into play. And I don't know. World building, I think, is kind of in a weird place. I don't know if you'd agree with that or not, but I think world building is kind of in a weird place where it's obviously creative, it's obviously fictitious, but it's not narrative necessarily or as such. So it's kind of a weird place. I did dabble a number of years ago with something that was an in-world book. So it was a book that I'm trying to figure out how to explain it. It was kind of like when it was kind of like when Rowling put together I'm trying to remember the name of the book now. The Magical Beasts book in the Potterverse, and then wrote it out. Then later on wrote it out in our own as an actual physical book. So I was playing on something like that, and that I kind of might put into creative quasi weird fiction, nonfiction thing, whatever. I guess it's kind of more fictional, but it's a different form than we would normally think about with fiction. Yeah. I find definitions to often be very, especially when we're dealing with literary definitions or genre definitions, be very loose. Yes, something along those. Yes, something like that. Fictional, but for nonfiction from within the world. Yeah, it's kind of a strange, kind of liminal place to be in some respects. But it was fun to put together, where it was kind of like writing as a character, as if a character was writing it. I guess, yeah. Some of the D&D books do that to a certain extent, in small scales, where we get the little bits from like Tasha and Xanathar and Mordenkainen in some of the more recent books. But this was kind of on an extended, like 60, 80 page level, which was kind of fun to put together and interesting to deal with. I don't know if that actually really was clear or not, but it's so much easier to work with a audience in hand. Yes, something like that. Yes, where you have the in character narration going on. I did play with something like that similar with my. So when I was an undergrad, we had a senior project we had to do, and in English we had the choice of doing either a fictional piece or a lit crit type piece. So what I decided to do, and both of them had a nonfiction element to it, or a critical element. If we did the fiction, we had to do like 20, 30 pages self-critiquing, basically. But what I decided to do was a series of fantasy short stories that were connected by a frame narrative. So each of the short stories so the frame narrative was a storyteller in a tavern, and all the stories that were part of it were things that he was telling. So I guess I've been playing around with that idea for 25 years or so in one way, shape, or form, off and on as they pop up. It's just it's a kind of fun thing to look at, think about, or a fun way to think about and work with stuff there. Cool. Where was I going here? But yeah, I do like the idea of the kind of, and I'm thinking about doing actually it's on my list, on my rather extensive and growing list, that I keep trying to take things off of, and then I keep adding stuff onto instead, because that never happens. On part of my growing list is over on the site. I do have the page for the this kind of junction multiverse I've been putting together. And one thing that I'm thinking about doing, and we'll see if it ever happens, because there's a lot of stuff there, is to do kind of field guides, where like a field guide to magics of the multiverse, flora, fauna, races, lineages, however you want to put it, that sort of thing, from an in-character narrator. just to kind of play with it, because it's just kind of fun to do. But I don't know if that will ever actually come to fruition, because the list of the to-do list is already rather large and continuously growing. Even as I try to take things off of it. And of course, silly little things like real jobs and all that, or regular jobs and all that sort of stuff keep getting in the way. All that silly stuff like grading and things. Yeah. I think, let's see, I should make this number 2, because this will be a different one. So one thing I've been playing around with the kind of magic system stuff, and I'm just kind of messing around with it, is seeing with this thing. Let me pull this out and grab a couple. How did I put that together? That's a 8, 6, 20. I think everything's 8, 6, or 20. Oh, there's a percentile. But we don't need the percentile. Screw that. I'm not going to do that part. Where does that go to? Oh, that's another page. Okay, cool. Yes, all right. Sorry, my document just got really kind of looked really weird all of a sudden, and I wasn't sure why. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of play around and take some notes here. There were also some other things that were on here that I forgot about, that I want to put my quick notes down for. Rules, limits. Under rules and limits, there can be a cost. Cost to magic is also one that I forgot to put on there, that I'm going to go ahead and put on my list. And I may throw that one in there too. Why not? Yeah, let's throw that in there too. Why the heck not? We'll also put tools, just because, and that's, I'm going to throw tools on here not because of like limiting or anything like that, but as as possibilities, or as things that stand out. So let me get some little spacing on here so I can kind of work this. And basically what I've done with these randomizers or random kind of things is given stuff to set up like a skeleton that I then go through and kind of flesh out, mess around with, and see what and then expand out in various ways. Because a lot of the things on there they're deliberately generic or deliberately vague, so that they can be interpreted or played with a number of different directions. Like the piece that I actually posted about on Threads and Bluesky a few days ago, with the group of, would have been probably Monday, I think, or last Monday maybe, 2 Mondays back. That was the group of, or Thursday, that was, let me call it up here again so I remember what exactly it was talking about. That was the group of, there we go. Yes, the disbanded organization of Arcanists that were the basically secret police of the new revolutionary regime, hunted down, neutralized members of the old regime. So what I had done there was I had rolled that one up on here. Let me actually, I think I've got the full document for them on here. I should still have the full document for them on here. 2024 December. That was these guys. Yes. Maybe that was these guys. Will this open? Yes. So basically, with the randomizing thing with it, I had put up together inactive, hidden legal organization that was of arcanists, spellcasters, that was created for the purposes of revenge, and was publicly founded. So it was founded by a government or government representative. So figuring out how to make that work, looking at it for a little bit, tossing around some possibilities. What came into my mind, what came to mind as I was thinking about a lot of that, figuring out how to mix a legal organization founded by a government in order to exact revenge, which doesn't necessarily seem to fit together very well. What came to mind was the Reign of Terror after the French Revolution, and the whole hunting down, removing the aristocracy came to mind. So that kind of ended up shaping these disparate parts of little skeleton things into something that I think turned out rather interesting and kind of hopeful for just something to play with. So a lot of what I kind of have in these things that I'm playing with, as far as these tables or whatnot, were just to kind of be something to kind of spawn some ideas and kind of mess with things. So I think for Magic System, just to kind of get things started, I'm going to go with this is going to be an internal energy. Is it consumable? Is it renewable? Is it exhaustible? It is limited. So people can burn out. That will be interesting. What is the internal source? That's a darn good question. Internal source, stored from external. Okay. And that will be... Okay, that could be fun. Method of casting. Let's see here. 4. That's going to be... What is that? That is... Okay, I like that. That could be fun. And then I'm going to skip that part. We got this part, 'cause I don't like that part anymore. We'll do this part. That is going to be a... Okay, it's going to be an interesting combination. So far, just kind of randomizing some things. I put together, we have this magic system is going to have an internal energy that is stored from somewhere outside, but it is limited and it is consumable. So it's not inexhaustible, but it is going to be, there's a limited amount of it. So it's going to be an interesting thing, but it's coming from some divinity. Casting method is going to be through calling upon spirits to do things. That kind of fits nicely with the deity-based thing. But there's going to be some kind of genetic element to it for who can use it. That's going to be a little weird, but we can make that work. Costs. No particular... no special costs for using it, just it can run out, and the deity may get mad, potentially. What about limits? I think we're going to do a few different limits. How many limits is this going to have to what it can or cannot do? Let's go with that. Cool, I like that. So what is 4? Okay. It's not going to be able to create anything. That's also creating. Okay. That's going to be a fun one. That creates something about the deities of this world. Okay, I like that. That's going to be, that's fun. I like that. That's going to have stuff for different... okay, so basically there for limitations as kind of a randomizer. The magic's not going to be able to create things out of nothing. Again, be kind of stuck with what's available, maybe manipulating what's available. But the casters are going to have to be able to be physically in contact with the ground, and iron is going to kind of mess with it. So that's going to be an interesting situation to work with, especially with deities. This might be I like that idea. This may be something where, so the iron thing kind of goes back to of course, the Fae, the Celtic and English, Irish, or Anglo-Irish idea of the Fae and iron, not iron interfering with their magic and that sort of their powers, their abilities, that sort of thing. Obviously, the Dresden Files uses something similar with Harry's magic and everybody wizard's magic going kind of wonky around iron stuff and that sort of thing. So I'm thinking what's going to end up in this case is these are going to be probably ancient kind of pre-Iron Age deities. They would probably exactly. Yes, exactly. That's kind of what I'm thinking this would go to in that regard, and that these might be more kind of chthonic deities of some regards, more kind of deep/earth related. That these might be kind of more kind of deep, kind of under the earth, in the earth sort of divinities that are getting this power from. Yeah. That puts a nice little spin in there. As far as the genetic talent side of things, we'll get to that. I'll get to that as I kind of go through here. So basically we have, and this again, I'm just going to jot down rough stuff. That could be definitely. That could definitely fall into it. These might just be a pre-Iron Age. I think, yeah, the touching earth part's going to be a little bit rougher. But that might just extend to metal in general. Right, definitely. That might even fit to just kind of metal in general. But these could be deities from an era before, from a pre-Bronze Age era or from a Bronze Age era that would then maybe have issues with or have been replaced perhaps later on. I could see some potential for running with that idea. They could go the route of the, how so many of the, say, She and the kind of Irish Fae became Fae from being kind of divine. Well, some of them, yeah, the weird relationship between the Fae and deities in Gaelic or Celtic lore and whatnot may be something that would be fun to play with in this case. I'm going to say here, practitioners. Basically, yes, yeah, definitely that would come into play too. That would be fun. That could be a fun spin on it. That's kind of what I like with kind of using some of these, or why I like playing with some of these. Yes, exactly. That's kind of where I'm thinking in some respects might come into play as well to some degree, or some way. It's kind of why I like playing with some of these little like self-made table things. So they really kind of get me going in different directions, or kind of finding ways to put disparate things together. It's a nice little creativity exercise for me, and I kind of enjoy playing with that, just to kind of see what comes out of it from time to time. It's a nice little break from the kind of, or if I'm stuck with something that's another project or something like that. Just taking about, a little while to mess with one of these for a little bit and see what comes out of it can kind of spawn some things. So practitioners will store external energy in their own bodies. Sort of, whoops, if I can actually spell properly, that would help. Let's see. This comes from. I'm going to say probably multiple. I think rather than one deity, this is definitely more. It's going to be more interesting to come from multiples. Just because I like, if I have deities involved, I like pantheons. It's I think that goes back to being exposed to Greco-Roman classical mythology before Catholic school. Maybe, I don't know, but I definitely prefer. I tend to prefer the idea of pantheons over monotheistic. Maybe it's also because of all the issues monotheistic faiths have caused on the history side, on my history side of things. But that's probably my own biases coming into play there. Let's see, from any of a group, and I'm just kind of half-assing some of this writing at the moment and can polish it and fix it up later. Let's see. Yes. Yeah, there is that problem. Yeah, when you get that kind of, when you can have forces that are working against each other that are of equal, that are kind of equal to each other, but can work to cross purposes, whether intentionally or otherwise. Plus, you get the relationships between and all of those things that can get much more, I think, complicated and interesting than if you have the monotheistic or even the dualist. We have one or we have two, and here's their relationship, and now we're done with things. And it's generally, but you can get a nice little. You can play around with things a bit more. You can have some more fun with things in those regards. And you get some weird combination. You can get some weird combinations of areas of influence or purview, if you prefer, where either something like that would definitely work. I'm also potentially thinking about something like almost like sort of a, not quite the same. It's not the best analogy, but a sort of titans who were later replaced, sort of setup, whether by their children or by some other family. It would be almost like a if the Aesir didn't absorb the Vanir, and just kind of replace them and kind of push them to more or less kind of forgetfulness. Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah, definitely. This might be more of a not so much a mainstream magic for the society, but maybe, or for the world, but maybe more of a the old ways or an old magic. Nice. Yes. Yes, maybe more of a. This might set itself up as more of a an old way, an old magic that's not necessarily used much anymore, or it's kind of it may be relegated to rural areas. I'm actually kind of liking that idea. Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah, definitely. Maybe even whether it be a replaced church type thing, or the replacement temple or whatnot, temple or church or whatnot, that's backed by the modern, the kind of more modern, maybe even quasi-scientific, or whatever else, whatever other type of magic might be into play there. Yeah, the get into the social institutions that would come into play there. Might be yeah, jot down notes, lots and lots of notes, always lots and lots of notes. Let's see, these deities. Days of society. Yep. Yes. Exactly. Something along those lines. Certain. Definitely. These come from or even the more elemental divinities being forced underground by the deities of society, or the culture deities. Your echidna, your even, well, actually go that way. We got your if you're Zeus, Poseidon, were kind of shoved to the side by like Hephaestus and Aphrodite, as kind of more higher, or like more not really higher, but more evolved, or something along those lines. Would be a kind of something I've kind of thought about for a little bit as well in that regard. I did mess with that idea of the different of a while back, of three or four tiers of divinities, with the sort of like original tier that would be the folks who were the kind of creative. Yes, yeah. That too, yeah, definitely. Where you have the sort of the deities who, I'm going to close these blinds real quick because that is, I see that bit of light coming in there. It's messing with my. There we go. That might be a little bit better. The idea of the primordial, who were there for the creating of the world, and then eventually society gets into the more nature-oriented, as they're trying to deal with the lightning, deal with the wild animals and all of that sort of stuff, and then eventually getting into the things of like the trades, the crafts, and then getting the physical, the kind of more physicality of society, or the tangible elements of society, and then getting into the fourth stage of the kind of more ephemerals, where you have the ideas of the ideals. Yes, that too. That adds an additional layer. Yeah, definitely. I don't really play around with that one too much, but definitely a good extra layer or two, another extra layer that can get in there and really kind of mess with some things. My lid back on there, keep that warm. Really liking this mug for the long streams, because it's a back when our kid was born, wife got this one for me for taking care of him, which has a nice little metal lid on top. Keeps everything nice and warmer than for these things. Let's see. Originally from the earliest days of society, before. Yeah, that would definitely be an interesting one too. I tend not to go the kind of Lovecraftian route, but I enjoy him, despite all of the issues of his era and himself. But definitely, that tends not to be a direction I usually go, although it could certainly work with this potential. So we got the limited energy, it's external. Okay, yes. collect a certain amount of energy from the deity, which does get. Yes, that is definitely not my usual, and that's definitely an interesting a route to potentially bring into there. Horror is not generally my genre, but although I do enjoy the occasional mythos piece, I just have to typically read multiple things at the time when I'm doing Lovecraft, because one story is about all I get through before my brain starts to hurt, which may partially be part of his intent. Yeah, I realized actually about a year or two back, I realized when I was going through a recent collection or a recently published collection that I think part of it's the subject matter and the way he's writing describing, but I think part of it's also that his writing style is very very prone to run-ons and comma splices, where it's very prone to having 3, 4, 5 line sentences that have like four different ideas going on in them. Those don't tend to throw me too much, but he's got a very 18th century style of writing in some respects, in terms of its structurally, grammatically speaking, and that tends to, that makes things very interesting. I find actually Fritz Leiber's related works to be more approachable in that regard, whether that be Our Lady of Darkness, or You're All Alone Now, The Sinful Ones, those ones that are very similarly inspired, but he's a little more, I guess, modern in his writing style, which makes it a little bit easier to get through. I always use all of my classes, I always use the Declaration of Independence to look at from a structural perspective predominantly, and a kind of, in terms of the argumentative structure and that sort of thing. And I make sure to point out to them every time that, I generally ask for a volunteer to read the first sentence out loud, and watch their eyes kind of widen as they go through the first. I think the version we currently have available in our materials is about 6 or 7 line paragraph. That's the first sentence, and then kind of watch them kind of gasping for breath at the end of it. That's always kind of a little bit of a wake up for them for different styles of writing and how writing changes over time. And can ultimately okay, cool. Fortunately, because it's going mostly through spirits, let's see. So since this is going to be mostly done through spirits, I think the amount of energy per spell is going to be or amount of fuel used per spell is probably not going to be a huge amount in each case, but how much they're given, I think, may be limited. This is kind of giving a little bit of almost warlock / cleric type setup, where there's the pact, the deal being made, and then they're only given a certain amount of each can call upon. Yeah, that would work. Okay, cool. I like that. And I think as far as casting methods, so this is kind of spirit guild, and I kind of like that. It works nice, dovetails nicely with the deity side of things, makes it nice and easy. I'm kind of thinking almost like GURPS's ritual magic or spirit magic, like the old 3E spirits book. Kind of the way to go with this, where the individual is calling upon spirit entities. In this case, they'd be representatives of the deity or deities, depending on how this works out in a finalized form. So that rather than actually, and also that also dovetails nicely, for the whole witchcraft analogy, dovetails nicely with early modern views of how witchcraft worked, or one of the early modern views of how witchcraft worked, because there were about a dozen different competing views at the time, of not necessarily the power being the caster themselves, but that the power coming from a spirit entity of some sort that was invoked by the caster. So I think that would work. That's going to work well in this case, but the spirits involved will be representatives of the deity, or probably tied to a particular deity, maybe not to all of them. I would say probably to, any of a group of, I think that would work well. So, let's see, how do we put this? I don't have a name for this, so I'm not going to bother with that at the moment. I'll put a placeholder. Caster name. So it is a placeholder, like carrots, like placeholders. That'll pop into my head at like 3 a.m, and I'll jot it down somewhere or try to remember it and not get back to sleep. Something along those lines. The kind of, or the, because we have those all over the fantasy genre, particularly in, as well as obviously, Catholicism, ancient Greece, and we have them all over, the fantasy genre, where we have the kind of beings that aren't quite divine but aren't quite mortal. I think the planars kind of fall into that degree for the D&D type setting. I'm not as up on them as I probably could be, but I think they kind of maybe fall into there a little bit. Some of the lesser demons may fall in there. The ones that don't have names, basically, those sorts of things might fall in there. By to send a to act on the so that's going to be kind of how that sets up, and I kind of like how that would work. And that might be something that might even go back well with the idea of being trapped, of the deities being trapped. That could work really nicely there, with the idea of deities being trapped, so they work through servitors of some sort. That actually kind of reminds me a little bit too of, that's getting me back into World of Darkness, between the antediluvians, and the or some of the theories about the antediluvians, and for VTM and the some of the mummies from mummy basically sleeping or recovering their bodies in the case of the mummies, and acting through agents and whatnot, which also I guess has a little bit of Anne Rice in there to some degree too, because I seem to recall her having something like that in there, maybe, but I'm really, really rusty on her stuff. So that's casting. Yeah. And as I recall, they kind of had some kind of action they were still able to take while they were sleeping. They were kind of able to kind of reach out and influence things to some regard, if I recall correctly. But again, it's been a really, really long time. Wife is a huge fan of or has been a huge fan of Rice. I'm not as big into her, but I recall a couple things I read maybe back in like high school, which was longer back than I want to think about. Let's see, this casting doesn't require much. The practitioner. Yeah, I was 96, which is, I think I gotta actually, because of how our school is set up, because of the deals we have with the local school district, I have had students who were born when I graduated, when I got out of grad school, the same year that I got out of grad school, which is kind of, and none of them were born by the time I got out of college, with very few exceptions. It's definitely a an experience. Fortunately, our campus ranges from, I think, 16 to 60 something for age ranges. In fact, one of my very first semesters, I had a guy who was 63 or something like that in the class, which was really kind of weird, being a nice, fresh out of school. What would that have been? That would have been 2008. That would have been 31-year-old with yes, been more than twice my age as the for my very first. It wasn't really my very first semester teaching, but my very first quarter in a quote unquote real job doing that. Yeah, that was an experience. Of course, I also had a guy in my grad class from the history department who was retired and went back to do a doctorate in history because he had the time and wanted to do it. So he had like a 700-page dissertation about one Civil War battle. It was kind of crazy. The rest of us were being told no more than 300 because it would never get published. He was just like, yeah, I don't care. So he had about a 700-page basically book on one Civil War battle. It was kind of crazy. But he was happy. That was the important part. Yeah. I can't imagine how long that took. At that point in time, when I started the program, we had unlimited amount of time from starting to completion. About 2 years into it, the state decided the time to degree was too high. Because we had people, I think the average was like 10 years or something like that, or 8 years or something like that. So they decided to put a 10 years from starting, a 10-year cap, so that you had 10 years from starting a doctoral program to completion. I think he was probably on a fairly high end for that, because you're figuring probably if he was full-time, he had about 2 years of classes, then he had some ABD time or some time for exams, and then he had researching and writing 600, 700 pages of history. That was probably, several years. But he enjoyed it. he was a really upbeat, was really happy with it, and was really happy with the whole thing. So, more power to him. Let's see. Doesn't have much of a practice. Does creates the effect. Yes. So yeah, okay. So they cast spells by calling upon the deity, send a servitor or spirit, act upon the caster's behalf. Means casters doesn't really require a whole lot of energy on their part, so they can continue for a while because eventually they're going to run out. And this is probably because and how much the deity can spare. How much power? That'll work, yeah. That's going to be a good question. That might actually be something we can put in, that can get in there. That might be something that would fall under here, I think. I'm going to put that in a question mark. That might be a possibility that would come into play. I think... Yeah, definitely. And that gets us into, well, yeah, that gets us to there. That can, yeah, that would fit that. Yeah, I think that would probably be something that would come into play there. Yes, so they would have to, yeah, I think that would be something to, that could be a good way to do that. Since the amount of, yeah, I think since the amount of energy they have available, so the source of magic is external, but it's stored within. So they're given a certain amount of, say, power to work with. But it is consumable, and it doesn't recharge. I think that might be something where the sacrifice might be that they, in return, that they feed some of their limited store of energy or their limited store of power to the servitor in some way. That might be a way to go about that one and make those and bring those all kind of together. I kind of like how that would feed into it, so that it's not so much that the that it's sort of I'm figuring out how I want to phrase it here. I'm just going to jot that down real quick this way, and I will come back and fix that and mess with it later. How much depends on the... Yeah, I think that might be a good way to do that. Size / severity. Yeah, I'm liking that. They're kind of that would work. And then they might be able to mitigate some of that with another sort of yeah, okay, I like that. So I'm thinking is, tentatively at least, is we have the so as a sort of sacrifice, the caster kind of sacrifices a bit of their consumable, non-renewable power to the kind of servant spirit servitor. How much obviously depends on how big, size, severity of the effect they're going for. but the amount that they have to give up may be mitigated or reduced by offering another sort of sacrifice during the course of the calling ritual. What exactly gets sacrificed? To reduce the cost depends on the deity. So it might be something that would be appropriate to whichever particular divinity it may be. I think I like that because then it may shift things around depending on, exactly, something they value, something that they are maybe associated with, or maybe it could be if there are oppositions, it could be something that stands against them is destroyed as a sacrifice. For a possibly that's going to be a little more difficult in some ways. I think something that's going to benefit them, something that they like, something that they are associated with. What they're attuned to, what they're associated with. Yes, yeah, exactly, something along those lines. Yeah, something along those lines. That could be could be physical, could be emotion, or other intangible. So it could be something that could be, it could be the physical thing. It could be, say, being in a particular emotional state. If we have a deity that's associated with or has some kind of affiliation with, say, I don't know, whatever emotional state we want to throw in there, that could be getting into achieving that state could be something that would come into play. It could be other intangibles, could be like a dream, could be a hope, could be a memory. Any of those could come into play depending on what deity is coming in there. And I like kind of having it, what is being sacrificed depending upon what the deity is, rather than having like a generic overall sort of thing. That creates a little more room to kind of play with it and kind of tailor it to the individual character, the individual whatever it happens to be. I like that. So cost, that comes up in terms of there, that's up above, so I don't need to have that anymore. Tools, so in tools that are going to come into play there's probably going to be some kind of ritual space. Yes, definitely, tied to the review, strengthens their domain, or possibly takes part of the person's, the caster's self into the divinity, making them more of a instrument in some respect. As another possibility there. Definitely some ritual space. Possibly, maybe not. What else might they use in there? Sigils/symbols. Just jotting down a few little tools that are going to come into play here because of what's going on here. This does not strike me as one that's going to be a fast cast or a kind of rapid cast type system. This is striking me as more of a, it's going to take some time to do things rather than being immediate, unless there is a putting things in place beforehand. Unless it's a case of like calling up one of the intercessors and having them kind of waiting in the wings for a particular trigger or something like that. Yeah, something along those lines definitely could be a potential in there as well. Yeah, right now tossing around various possibilities and see what we got here. So I think this particular case, because of the current condition, and their casters must be in direct contact with earth / dirt in order to conduct effective rituals. So they're going to have to be in touch with the ground, in touch with the dirt, ground, earth, whatever, in order to call upon this. Let's see. That's kind of part of it, and that can get into the kind of trapped, constrained, being closer to, in that regard, being sort of more connected to in some respects, by being in touch with essentially the representation of the prison, if that route goes into things. Definitely. Let's see what else. Let's see. Iron. The presence. Or. So that also gives a good reason for Iron to be kind of messing with things. If the server, if there's some kind of spirit entity that's actually doing the action, creating the effect, so that can maybe interfere with them on more of a physical or metaphysical level. Interferes interferes with the ability to manifest, and I don't really want to say, I don't want to use interferes again, but that really scrambles. Maybe in terms of the abilities of the servitors, it would. I like that idea. And essentially grounds could be. I'm thinking that may tie in is just kind of came to mind is that it may mess with their power, their sort of magic, because that Iron may serve like essentially like an arcane lightning rod, that it kind of draws the power and then grounds it, without allowing an effect to happen. that might be a possibility, which would also cause problems for them manifesting, since they're made up of the same stuff as their power in some ways, or could be made up of the same thing. That I kind of like as a possibility, as a potential way to think about that or work with that. This tends to, or this, yeah, something along those lines. Yeah, definitely. So that would potentially carry over into there. I'm kind of liking that idea. This is part of why I like throwing some of these randomized things in there occasionally, just to gets that kind of running through some of these with just off of randomly created things, and figure out how to make these things work with each other. Let's see. This. Where did I go with that? I was doing something with there. Oh yes. Generally only to be found in more rural or remote areas where yeah, definitely that would come into play in this one. It also would kind of explain why, one reason, aside from social cultural reasons, that they're kind of more rural, more remote. They're staying away from the big cities where you have your or even the big towns where you have your smithies and your iron-bound doors and your all of that sort of stuff. Now, what that means in terms of it's sort of honest, I guess. As I'm thinking about that now, it occurs to me that that's sort of the effect that, yes, that could potentially come into play, certainly. It occurs to me that that's sort of the way that metal, particularly iron and steel, work in Stephen Briss Strigera, except instead of grounding magic, it just attracts magic, as his in-world reason for not having plate armored people and all that sort of stuff. His out-of-world reason being that he just doesn't like full plate and all that sort of thing. But that idea that this large amounts of metal attract magic to it, but in that case, instead of grounding, it makes it a bigger target. Definitely one of my favorite settings and worlds, and writers. Where was I going there? I don't remember. Anyway, was in my head and then gone. It just kind of struck me that's kind of similar to, but in a different way, and I kind of like seeing that, like working with that. I think also one of the weird things that comes up in here is that because of, no, I don't want to do that. Self-editing. Okay, so it's going to be incapable. It's not going to be able to create things out of nothing. And this is probably because of this goes back to, so anything created by the, keep referring to them as servitors here. We'll probably give them a more kind of in-world name later. I'll go with like an in-world-ish name later on at some point in time. Is illusory, is usually, or temporary at best. So basically, that the idea being anything that's uh, the servitors create is going to be definitely it's going to be either illusory or it's going to be temporary. It kind of disappears within moments of being created, just because of the. I think it's going to come down to probably that we're dealing with sort of spirit entities that are creating things, and that's not necessarily going to, or that are doing the magic, doing the effect. It's probably going to be a little more subtle in some regards as a magic, not necessarily going to be your. I don't know. I guess it could kind of get into the. Depends on how. Set that up, because on one hand we have kind of the more traditional. Spirit type magic where things are more subtle, where it's more kind of alterations of luck or moving small objects or protecting or these sorts of things, versus, but on the other hand you've also got the kind of white wolf, the World of Darkness, werewolf style spirit, where you can, or spirit magic, where you can have things like, flaming things and whatnot if you have a fire spirit bound to something or something along those lines. But I'm thinking this is probably going to be more, probability and that sort of thing. It's definitely going to probably come across as more subtle. Admittedly, historically, when we're dealing with witchcraft, and witchcraft was one of the theories, one of the views, was that the witch called upon devils, demons, which were essentially spirit entities in the view of the era, the early modern era. They would do things like change people into animals, or curdle milk, or do things along those lines. Curdling milk, causing diseases, causing illnesses. That would probably be easily within the purview here. Shape shifting, changing people into animals and things. That may come in. That may not. It may depend a bit on the divinity. I think what's going to be in the capability of any server is going to be based on the divinity. Change is certainly possible. There was a great deal of early modern debate about whether witchcraft shape-shifting was actually shape-shifting, or whether it was whether it was an illusion of shape-shifting, or whether it was psychological. And there were people who would get very, very incensed about which of the three was the real thing that was going on. Yes, definitely that would come into play potentially if that comes in there as well, and that can get all kinds of messy, in so many ways. So many werewolf stories that play around with conservation of mass and shifting and what's left behind when somebody changes shape. I think the least it can mean big wolves, or in the case of at least one short story I recall catching, I want to say was it Harlan Ellison's, or was it, do I have it up here? I do not have that one up here. Okay. It wasn't I don't think it was Harlan Ellison's anthology. It was another one that I've got. I'll have to look that up. It was normal-sized wolves, or normal-sized wolf, but when the change happened, a pile of pink goo is left behind, to put it nicely. And then something had to happen to regain that mass too. I don't remember how the mass was regained for coming back from wolf to person, but something was done in that. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That was probably the more gruesome part of that particular short story. That was, I want to say that came from like the 80s or 90s, maybe. off the top of my head, I don't recall which. Unfortunately, those anthologies are on another floor of the house. 'Cause I moved most of that stuff that was not historical downstairs. But I'll have to take a look at that and see what that story was offhand. Because if I don't, it'll drive me nuts, and about 2 in the morning it'll pop into my head, and yeah, that's the way these things work. Let's see. So I think definitely, as far as those are just generic notes, let's put that down here. I'm going to give a little bit of space there because reasons. Okay, cool. That also comes into play. And that could get kind of weird. I don't know if shapeshifting is going to be involved, but those are definitely things that would come into play that could be interesting to work with. Let me put the what? Oh, okay, that's Old English. Sure, that works. That's fine. When I have a typo in Modern English and it makes an actual word in Old English, awesome. That means the same thing. Awesome. All kinds of fun stuff. We're gonna put that there. I think those are gonna be later things. I'm trying to type what and get what instead. Same word, different era. That's fine. I can leave that as is. I don't care about that typo. Let me save this stuff so I don't lose it somewhere, because that would be bad. This is going to be fun to play with and clean up and everything. Yeah. Yep. What? Always a fun one. I am so rusty on my Old English. I need to go back and look at some of that stuff. I used to be able to translate Beowulf reasonably well, among other things, but Beowulf is relatively difficult in that regard compared to Church Old English, which is pretty easy and straightforward. But I really need to brush up on that stuff at some point in time. It's been way too long. I should brush up on my Middle English as well. I used to be really good in 3 or 4 different dialects. I think that's gotten pretty rusty. Used to have mid-14th century London dialect, the Gawain poet's dialect, which is a bit northeast of London. I think York dialect and another one down pretty well, but I've kind of lost a lot of that, I think, from lack of use. Yes. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've looked at the. I have a copy of Kleber's edition of the original, and Seamus Haney's side-by-side translation / original, and 4 or 5 different Anglo-Saxon dictionaries and grammars. During grad school, I audited an undergrad class on Old English that was being taught by one of my committee members' proteges, because she herself wasn't teaching them. But yeah, it's been a while. But I haven't actually looked at either of those, either Middle or Old, directly in quite a while. I need to go back and do that sometime. I also managed to somehow score myself a copy of what's his name, E.V. Gordon's Old Norse dictionary, which he was a good buddy of Tolkien's. And I got really lucky at one point and scored a copy of Tolkien and Gordon's edition of Gawain the Green Knight in the original, which I was very happy about. The only issue I really have with Tolkien's translation is being in prose. I'm not sure if that was a Tolkien thing or a or a Christopher thing. Because obviously I haven't seen the original notes that Christopher was working off of, but yeah, that was definitely one that I was looking forward to, and was kind of it's interesting to look at, but it was kind of a little bit of a letdown in some respects. But still fun to work with. Yeah, it was many years ago. Yeah, definitely accessibility. It takes more work to get the alliteration, keep alliteration and everything. Tolkien did a really good job of that with his translation of Gwen and the Green Knight. He managed to keep the alliteration without it sounding stilted or old. There was a guy, Stone, I think it was, about 20 years later, who did the Penguin or Norton. Either the Penguin or Norton edition of Gawain the Green Knight, and it sounds like he was writing in the 19th century, and he lost all the alliteration and everything else. It was really it was not great. I used to teach Tolkien's translation of Gawain, and I would also bring in Stone's next to it, and I would read part of it to the class, and just to kind of show them the differences the translator editor makes, and then let them know that the one that was harder to understand and read was the one that came 30 years later. Yeah, those were kind of fun days. It was back, I don't remember when it was. It was one of the years I was there that I got to teach a Great Books 1 class, which was at I was at the State University's main campus, and I was teaching occasionally at one of the branch campuses. Really, it was a facility owned by one of the branch campuses, so it was a branch of a branch. It was a very, very strange situation. And some of my Comp 2 students needed an extra English class, and they petitioned to have a Great Books 1. They asked for me to teach it, and the folks agreed to that. But the assistant department chair who was in charge of that branch campus, the department for that branch campus, chose the books for the course. I did not get to, unfortunately. So for Great Books 1, which was supposed to cover, we could either start with Beowulf or we could start with the Greeks. And it was supposed to go all the way up through and including Shakespeare. The assistant department chair chose the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, and Beowulf. So her choices stopped in the 11th century. There were still about 4 or 5 centuries to go in what was covered, and they were all epics. No real variety in that regard. When I got in touch with her and asked about which editions or which translations that were chosen, so I would have the same ones the students had, the response I got was, well, it doesn't really matter, does it? And that was when I realized that the person who was choosing the books for the course, who was the assistant department chair, was a American lit specialist and never had to deal with translations. So there was a definite training differences going on in that regard. She was more experienced and she'd been around longer, but she was an American lit specialist. She'd never had to deal with translations ever before. So I just kind of cringed, gritted my teeth, figured out what versions they were getting, and also had lots and lots of handouts as supplemental readings in order to get them things that were like, romances or bits of plays. Actually, I think I showed Much Ado About Nothing for that one. Yeah, I think that was the one I chose, the Branagh version, because I wanted to get a play in there, but I also didn't want to have to copy the entire thing, and also I wanted to get a non-tragedy non-tragedy, non-history, because whenever Shakespeare comes up, the high schools always do. The high schools and the middle schools always do the the tragedies and the histories. It's always, Othello and Julius Caesar and all of that stuff is rarely, if ever, any of the comedies. At least in my experience. I think we had Julius Caesar one year. I don't know what the other one we had was. We had and Romeo and Juliet, of course. Right now, my middle school kid is doing. They just finished up Othello, which was a heck of a choice for 8th grade. But yeah, I have not seen the Wilson ones. I would definitely check in with. I'll check in with my wife. She's been reading a lot of the epics and such. She was a English classics double major, and she was originally going to grad school for classical history before she quit that and went over to library science. We still have an entire bookcase of Greek and Roman works in translation and in the original, and I think about 5 or 6 different editions. Yeah, I think she has about 5 or 6 different editions of all of the Homeric stuff and Virgil, because she just has a whole mess of. We just kind of accumulate them. I have like 4 different editions of Beowulf, and I think 3 or 4 different editions of Chaucer. She has a whole ton of editions or translations of the of Homer and Virgil. Yeah. Yeah, I'm only really 2nd generation in on either side of the family. My maternal side were Kentucky / West Virginia miners. My grandfather on that side was a itinerant welder, going around the various strip mines. My mother's generation was the first college-bound generation. I don't recall how many of them actually. I think maybe 2 or 3 of the 6 went and finished. And then dad's side, my great-grandparents were the first ones that came over here from Poland, and ran a shoe store. And well, actually, most of them came over when they were young. Their parents brought them over, and then that generation had a shoe store and I think a candy shop, if I recall correctly, over in Slavic Village, where English was not very heavily spoken, and I think he had 1 year. He had 1 year on the GI Bill. And then after he was in the his older brothers were in World War II, and then he joined up at the tail end and was sent over during the occupation, where they figured out that he was fluent in Polish and loaned him out to the MPs. Oh yeah. They loaned him out to the MPs when they found out he learned Polish, so he could walk around the camps and listen for where all of the illegal stills and black market stuff was going on. Then he came back from there, did a year, and then started off in a bank for a bit, then ended up in a warehouse. And then his kids, my dad's generation, were the first college-bound generation. I think most of them were like 1 year, or like one. Let's see. My aunt had a degree in something. Don't know what it is, because she never actually used it. She got it, and then she went to work with her husband's family's hardware store. And I think Dad, he was the first to do grad school. I was the first to, as a 2nd generation for academic stuff, and the first to go to complete terminal. yeah. So it's kind of my spouse's family on the other hand is they've got like 6 generations of higher ed in the family on both sides. But one of her great grandfathers was a congressional representative, though, so, and lawyer, so that kind of set the tone there. I am very easy to get off track, as my students have found. But that's cool. Where was I going here? Tools. That's where we were. That was kind of at a point of dealing with tools. I think, obviously, there's going to be a ritual space, probably outdoors. This is going to be generally outdoors. Yeah, Polish mythology is a lot of fun. Slavic mythology in general is a lot of fun. One of my other favorite authors is Ilona Andrews, which is really a husband-wife duo published under one name. Basically, she is Russian. Came over here, I think, in the 80s, 90s. But they pull a lot of Slavic mythology into their, particularly their Kate Daniels series, which is a post-Magopocalypse, post-apocalyptic urban fantasy PNR, where the magic returning was the cause of the apocalypse. And as part of that, they bring up a lot of they tend to pull a lot of they pull some of the common mythologies. They've had chimeras and all that sort of stuff coming into play, but they also pull some of the more obscure stuff. They pull a lot of Slavic because she knows those really well, and they pull a lot of some of the more obscure pieces from European, African, and occasionally Asian mythologies. They do a really good job of it with that series too. It's also just kind of a fun series to see what comes in there. Because they've got an expansion on the shifter side of things. They have a really interesting take, I think, on vampires and necromancy. Basically, their vampires are mindless undead killing machines and their necromancers are people who can kind of reach out, grab what remains of the minds of vampires, and basically steer them, guide them, ride them, drive them, and speak through them, and that sort of thing. So it's a really kind of fun take on how those work. They also throw in a lot of things with Mesopotamian. They throw a fair bit of Mesopotamian in there. They got a whole bunch of other things they kind of throw in. So they're really they're really a lot of fun in that regard. Yes, in a lot of ways. And although the Upir are different for them as well, because there is one that shows up independently in one of the first 4 or 5 books in the series, I think. That kind of shows up on its own. So it's a really kind of it's a kind of everything, including the kitchen sink setting and world. It's a lot of fun to work with, and they've got a really great sense of humor that comes into play with it as well. Yeah, definitely. Particularly the Daniel series is a really fun one. It's post-apocalyptic. It's magic coming back, but magic hasn't come back all at once. It's kind of coming back or it did come back all at once, but then it went back to technology, and it kind of has these waves of alternating technology and magic. And every time these waves hit, when the wave of magic hits, the car stops working. When the wave of technology hits, the magic stops working, and that sort of thing. And then I think it was 7 years, I think it is in World, you get a really big wave that basically that gods can start manifesting during. so you get all kinds of different like mythologies and legends and folklore and things coming into play with with it. It's really a lot of fun, and they have and like I said, they've got a really great sense of humor that comes into play in a number of different places. One of the bits they had floating around was the sign, trying to identify or interpret the sign. And the sign was basically that this was a flying turtle crossing. It's like, yeah, I got that. That this is where the flying turtles cross the road. But I don't get the other mark on here. And that's their fire breathing. Things along those lines. They just kind of play with and have some fun with this kind of setup, while also having a bunch of other things floating around in it. You got hydras coming into play there. You've got politics coming into play with the various factions of the city. It's set in Atlanta. That series is set in Atlanta. There's a spin-off set in Kentucky, I want to say, or roughly around Kentucky. And then there's another spin-off that is set in, where is it? One of the Carolinas, I think. It's Wilmington. What Wilmington? But Wilmington can be in all kinds of different states. Yeah, where is that? Yes, I know that part. What state was that in? I want to say it was one of the Carolinas, but it's along the coast. And it's not too far from Atlanta, relatively speaking. Okay, yes, left Atlanta, da. But where? No. None of that is helpful. Okay. Oh well. Basically, it's just they think they've just put it as Wilmington. They've had it on the coast. It could be anywhere along the coastal sides there. Yeah. So yeah, they play with a lot of stuff, and it's a lot of fun series. They've got you've also got interactions between werewolves, werebears, hyenas, bison. What are the ones they have in there? Mongoose, rats, various big cats. I don't remember what else is in there. There's a bunch of other ones. They've gone the whole thing with the kitchen sink run as far as that goes, which has kind of made it a lot of fun just to try to pick out where things are coming from and what mythology is coming into play in what particular spot and what the kind of focal mythology of the particular book is going to be, as you kind of try to piece together what is this creature that's doing this thing. They've also bring in some American folklore as well, because there was one of the spin-off books has a hodag showing up and giving some history behind the hodag as well, which was fun. So anyway, I think it's about time for me to go get some stuff. I gotta get some house stuff done, so I'm gonna go ahead and log off here. I think as we do so, who we got there? I'm gonna jump over to. Hey, we've got a mace up there. I'm just gonna I try to go ahead and run into other raid over to other things and see where things are. Yes, likewise. Always good to chat. I'm going to run over here to Noir Enigma's place for a little bit before completely heading out, just to kind of give him a little bit of extra stuff and everything. So we'll see if I can make that work. How am I doing this again? Why is this not working here? Did the interface change? There we go. That's what I want. Okay, cool. Faces are changing. Give me that. No, not that. There we go. That's what I want. I will eventually figure this out. There we go. Cool. There we go. That'll work. And that's just me. Okay, cool. That's fine. Will this work? Cool beans.
A dog is barking at you, and that player goes, "I'm being attacked," you immediately worry. you immediately like, Frank, no, right? But with B, they can have that line of like, "I'm being attacked," and everybody